Okay, this is another lot of binding that I've just done to use on a quilt. So as you can see, I've joined all these strips together, so they're all joined exactly the same way. I've pressed my seam open and then I have pressed that in half. So now I know that this end is done like that, and if I go to the other end of my binding, I've also got the direction that I need my binding to be in. So all that's left now is for me to take it to the sewing machine. Okay, I've just placed a quilt down and I'm going to use the binding. Now you'll see that I've left the tail of about 6 to 8 inches and I'm going to start sewing. Now I'm not using a 1/4 inch seam, I'm using a 1/2 inch seam. So I'm just going to start sewing down the side, keeping my binding on the edge of the quilt. When I get down to the end of the quilt, I'm going to stop stitching the same distance from the end of the quilt as from the side of the quilt, which is 1/2 inch. I'm going to lift my presser foot. I'm going to fold over at right angles and back again for my corner. So the folded edge is aligned with this end and the raw edge is aligned with that end, and then I'm just going to turn my quilt around, drop my feed dogs again and start sewing down the other side. And I'm going to repeat that until I come to the last corner of my quilt. Okay, now I've stopped sewing round about that distance away from where the other end of the binding was. Now I'm just going to finish off and just move it a fraction away. Now you need to have the overlap for your top part of the binding where we've come to, so I just lay it down close. Now you can see where that starts there. Now I'm going to take seam allowance of about 1/2 inch plus another 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to mark on my fabric. Now you can see when I open this out, I know exactly which way I need to cut the angle, which is across that way, because I'd pre-cut it so that I didn't get confused. So all I need to do now is to lay my fabric open, to place my bind aid tool on there, to make sure that I line the lines up with my name facing down that way, and to make sure the line goes the right way. Now where I've marked it, I'm just going to now draw a line across my fabric. That's my cutting line. So I'm actually going to just cut that fabric now along that line. That's waste. Now I can lay the opened parts down, and I need to now lift my quilt up so that I can get to the other bit. And as we did before, we just lay it across and allow that 1/2 inch seam allowance and stitch it from there to there. Now the best thing to do with that is to put a couple of pins in so that you don't lose it. You are better off to have more than 1/2 inch than less than 1/2 inch, so that you can stretch the fabric a fraction, but if it's too narrow then you'll have too much fabric. So I'm just going to sew that down there now.